The greatest structures of the Middle Ages were not built by kings. They were built by 30 master masons, architects whose names history nearly erased. You will discover the true stories of the geniuses behind Europe's most iconic stone marvels, moving beyond simple facts into the captivating mysteries of their lives and work. How did a single fall from scaffolding alter the course of English architecture? Why would a builder carve a secret symbol into a hidden stone? We will meet the visionaries who defied gravity with stone lace and the military engineers who designed impregnable fortresses, figures often shrouded in legend and anonymity. This journey reveals the human ambition and hidden codes etched into the very fabric of cathedrals and castles. What does it take to leave a mark on the world that lasts 1,000 years? That choir fire was a catastrophe that changed everything. In the year 1174, a blaze tore through the eastern end of Canterbury Cathedral, the very heart of English Christianity. The monks were devastated, watching centuries of their sacred history crumble into ash and blackened stone. They needed a miracle worker, and they looked across the Channel to France, where a revolution in stone was already underway. They found William of Sens. He arrived not just as a builder, but as a prophet of a new architectural gospel. His mission was audacious: to erase the old, heavy Norman style and replace it with something England had never seen before, the soaring, light-filled vision of early Gothic architecture. He brought with him the pointed arch and the ribbed vault, engineering secrets that allowed walls to climb higher and windows to grow wider, transforming solid rock into a skeletal framework of breathtaking beauty. The work was perilous, a dance with gravity performed on wooden scaffolds high above the ground. For 5 years, William directed this stone symphony, his vision steadily rising from the ashes. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, the maestro fell. A section of scaffolding gave way, and William plummeted to the floor of the choir, suffering terrible injuries. He tried to continue, directing from a bed, but the pain was too great. His body broken, he was forced to return to France, a hero exiled in the middle of his greatest act. What became of him after that is one of history's quiet mysteries. His final years lost to time, but his legacy was set in stone. The choir of Canterbury, finished by his successor William the Englishman, stood as a beacon. It was a declaration that architecture could aspire to heaven, and it lit a path that every great English cathedral builder would follow for the next 300 years. William of Sens proved that a single mind could redirect the course of an entire nation's skyline, even if he never lived to see his work completed. The fall of William of Sens left a question hanging in the English air. Could a native son rise to such heights? The answer arrived a century later, not with a dramatic accident, but with the steady, brilliant administration of a single man. His name was Henry Yeovil, and he would become known as the King's Mason. While William was a visionary in port, Yeovil was the ultimate insider, the master builder who shaped the very face of royal and religious power in England for over 40 years. His career spanned the reigns of 2 kings, Edward III and Richard II, a period of war, plague, and immense ambition. Yeovil was the man they all turned to when they needed to make that ambition permanent. His fingerprints are on some of England's most iconic spaces. Walk into the nave of Westminster Abbey today, and you are walking through Yeovil's masterpiece. He took the older, darker sections of the church and extended them with a revolutionary new style. This was the birth of perpendicular Gothic, a style Yeovil helped to perfect. Forget the rounded arches of the Normans or the early pointed arches of William of Sens. Perpendicular Gothic was all about verticality. It created walls that were essentially vast grids of stone, filled with towering windows that let in floods of light. It was architecture as sheer, glorious structure, and it made every building that came before seem heavy and earthbound by comparison. But Yeovil's genius was not confined to churches. Step into Westminster Hall, the great ceremonial heart of the Palace of Westminster. Its most breathtaking feature is the immense hammerbeam roof, a seemingly impossible canopy of English oak that appears to float without central support. That roof was Yeovil's design. He created a space so vast and awe-inspiring that it was meant to humble every noble and ambassador who entered. a physical manifestation of the king's authority. He worked on the Tower of London, on London Bridge, and on castles across the realm. He was not just a designer, he was a national institution. So how did a stonemason achieve such unprecedented influence and wealth? The secret was not just in his drafting skill, but in his ledger books. Henry Yeovil was a master of logistics, one of history's great project managers. He did not simply draw plans, he orchestrated an empire of stone. He managed vast quarries, securing the finest materials from across England. He commanded armies of laborers, carpenters, and sculptors, often working on a dozen major sites at once. He negotiated contracts, controlled immense budgets, and delivered projects on time for the most demanding clients in the kingdom, the monarchy itself. In an age where most craftsmen lived and died in obscurity, Yeovil became a wealthy landowner, a respected figure who advised kings. He proved that the architect could be as powerful as the nobleman because he held the keys to building their legacy. His story shifts our focus from the solitary genius to the brilliant executive, the man who could translate a king's dream into a kingdom's reality. Yet for all his power and influence, Henry Yeovil left behind no personal manifesto, no sketchbook of his private thoughts. To find that, we must cross the channel again and step into the mind of a very different kind of builder. His name is Villard de Honnecourt, and he is a ghost in the historical record, known only through a single, miraculous artifact. In the 13th century, he compiled what we now call his Lodge Book, a portfolio of over 250 drawings that is less a blueprint and more a map of a curious, brilliant, and utterly medieval imagination. Open its pages, and you are not just looking at plans for a cathedral. You are tumbling into a world where a precise diagram for a church choir sits beside a whimsical sketch of a lobster, where instructions for building a sawmill share a page with a lion drawn from life, or at least from the stories of travelers. This book is a treasure chest of the medieval mind, a place where sacred geometry and practical engineering meet pure, unadulterated curiosity. So who was Villard? The book's few notes tell us he was from Picardy in France, and that he traveled widely, perhaps to Hungary and Switzerland, but his profession is the great mystery. Was he a master mason, a talented draftsman employed by a lodge, or perhaps a teacher, collecting knowledge to instruct future generations of builders? The book suggests all of these and none. It feels intensely personal, a working notebook for someone who wanted to understand how the world fit together, from the mechanics of a perpetual motion machine to the perfect proportions of a human face. One drawing in particular has captivated and confused scholars for centuries. It is labeled in his hand, How to Draw Figures Using Geometry. It shows a man's face inscribed within a complex web of circles and squares. At first glance, it seems like a simple artist's trick, a way to sketch a head correctly, but look closer. The geometry is dense, almost obsessive. Some believe it is more than an art lesson, that it contains esoteric knowledge, a secret code linking human proportion to divine harmony, the very same principles that would govern the layout of a great church. Was Villard recording the sacred secrets of his craft, or was he simply a keen observer trying to systemize beauty? The debate continues because the book refuses to give easy answers. This is its true magic. Villard's portfolio is not a finished thesis. It is a mind caught in the act of thinking. We see him puzzle over how to make a trebuchet work, experiment with ways to carve a statue so it looks correct from a distance, and jot down a clever design for a choir window. He is not presenting a grand theory of architecture. He is showing us the raw ingredients, the questions that buzzed in the head of a medieval craftsman. It is the closest we will ever get to peering over the shoulder of a 13th century genius as he works. While Yeovil shows us the power of the architect as CEO, Villard shows us the architect as a perpetual student, forever sketching, wondering, and connecting the dots between heaven and earth, between a church spire and the shell of a snail. His legacy is not a building you can visit, but a doorway into a lost world of thought, reminding us that behind every stone monument was a human being with a notebook, trying to figure it all out. While Villard's notebook captured fleeting curiosity, another architect was building a legacy meant to last 1,000 years, far to the east. The city of Prague, under the Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV, was being transformed into an imperial capital to rival Paris or Rome. And the man Charles trusted to carve this dream from Bohemian stone was Peter Parler. Hailing from the renowned Parler family of masons from Cologne, Peter was summoned to Prague around the year 1356. A young master handed the project of a lifetime, the completion of St. Vitus Cathedral. This was not just a church, it was the spiritual heart of the empire, and Peter's vision for it would redefine Gothic architecture. His most breathtaking innovation lies overhead in the cathedral's choir. Look up, and you do not see simple ribbed vaults. Instead, you see a complex, dancing web of stone ribs, a net vault that resembles frozen lace or a celestial spiderweb. This was the birth of the Parler style. It was vaulting not just as structural support, but as exuberant decoration, a stone tapestry that celebrated the sheer joy of the builder's craft. The ribs intersect in star-like patterns and pendant keystones that seem to drip from the ceiling, creating a dynamic, almost fluid sense of movement high above the solemn space below. This intricate stone lace was framed by another of Parler's masterstrokes, the immense stained glass windows. He designed the walls to hold vast panels of colored light, like the magnificent window depicting the Last Judgment. When the sun streams through, it sets the entire net vault ablaze with color, transforming the choir into a kaleidoscope of divine light and intricate shadow. It is an immersive sensory experience, architecture as both engineering and profound artistry. Peter's genius, however, was not confined to the cathedral grounds. He left his mark on the very connective tissue of the city. Look at the iconic Charles Bridge, the stone span that has linked the old town to the Prague Castle district for centuries. While the bridge itself was begun just before his time, Parler designed its most defining feature, the majestic Old Town Bridge Tower. This gate is not merely a defensive structure, it is a triumphal arch celebrating the monarchy, covered in sculpted coats of arms, statues of saints, and a portrait of Emperor Charles IV himself. It announced that crossing this bridge was a passage into the emperor's realm, setting a standard for beauty that every subsequent bridge tower would aspire to. What makes Peter Parler's story so pivotal is the dynasty he created. His workshop was a family business, training his sons and relatives who then spread the Parler style across Central Europe. They carried those signature net vaults and decorative flourishes to cathedrals and town halls from Austria to Poland. This is no longer just one man's brilliance, it was a school of thought, a brand of architectural excellence that shaped the skyline of an entire region for generations. Peter Parler proved that an architect could build more than buildings. He could build a lasting language of stone, spoken by his children and his children's children, long after his own hands had laid down their tools. The intricate stone lace of Prague finds its purest, most daring expression back in the city that birthed the Gothic dream. Paris in the 13th century was a crucible of architectural ambition, and at its center stood the unfinished masterpiece of Notre Dame. Two names stand out in its final, glorious ascent, Jean de Chelles and Pierre de Montreuil. Jean de Chelles appears in the records around the year 1250, taking on a task that would forever change the cathedral's silhouette and soul. His mission was to build the grand transepts, the arms of the cross that give the church its iconic shape. Before Chelles, Notre Dame's sides were relatively plain, heavy walls. He envisioned something radically different, walls that were not walls at all, but immense screens of stone and glass. He designed and began the north and south transept facades, and in doing so, he gave the world the rose window as we know it. These were not just windows, they were cosmic wheels of light, over 40 feet in diameter, crafted from thousands of pieces of stained glass. The north rose, depicting the Old Testament prophets and kings circling the Virgin and Child, was a theological diagram written in sunlight and color. Chelles framed these radiant marvels with delicate stone tracery and galleries of statues, turning the sides of the cathedral into breathtaking works of art in their own right. But his time was cut short. The work passed to another master, a man who would earn the reverent title, the Doctor of Masons. Pierre de Montreuil was more than a successor, he was a perfectionist of light and line. He took Chelles' visionary plans and executed them with a surgeon's precision, completing the south transept and its rose window. His genius lay in pushing the structural logic of Gothic architecture to its absolute limit. He made stone behave in ways that seemed to defy its own nature, carving it thinner, lifting it higher, and piercing it with more light than anyone thought possible. You can see this daring spirit not just at Notre Dame, but at his other surviving masterpiece, the lower chapel of the Sainte-Chapelle. While the upper chapel, the Royal Reliquary, is famous for its walls of glass, the lower chapel was Montreal's challenge. It was a dark, low space meant for servants and staff. Yet Montreal refused to let it be gloomy. He designed a forest of slender, elegant columns, painted in brilliant blues and golds, and vaulted the ceiling with such grace that the space feels uplifted, not subterranean. He proved that even a humble foundation could be touched by sublime beauty. Together, though likely never as partners, these two masters performed a final act of alchemy on the Gothic ideal. Where earlier cathedrals were mountains of stone with windows punched in, Chelles and Montreal created the illusion of a cathedral woven from light, held together by the slenderest threads of rock. They moved the style from the powerful, muscular early Gothic to the radiant, weightless high Gothic. Their work in the heart of Paris became the ultimate textbook, a standard of perfection that every visiting mason, bishop, and king would carry home with them. They did not just complete a building, they defined an era's highest aspiration, to trap heaven's light in a cage of stone and offer it back to the city below. Paris set the standard, but it was in the northern city of Amiens where the Gothic dream achieved its most perfect and monumental form. Rising from the banks of the Somme River, Amiens Cathedral is not merely a church, it is a symphony in stone, the largest Gothic cathedral in France, and a testament to the power of a unified vision across generations. The man who first heard that symphony in his mind was Robert de Luzerches. Around the year 1220, he was entrusted with an audacious task to create a cathedral of unprecedented scale and harmony for a city grown wealthy from the woad dye trade. His genius was in the very first lines he drew, the ground plan. Luzerches conceived of Amiens not as a collection of parts, but as a single, soaring entity. He laid out a nave of breathtaking width and height, designing a structure that would feel both immense and miraculously balanced. The secret was in his proportions. He employed a system of geometric ratios, likely based on the square and the triangle, that governed every dimension of the building. The width of the nave relates to its height, the height of the arcade to the clerestory, all in a silent, mathematical harmony that the eye perceives as profound beauty. When you stand in the nave today, you feel not crushed by the scale, but lifted by it. The space is luminous, airy, and serene, a direct result of Luzerches' masterful initial design. He began raising the walls, setting the physical foundation for this stone mountain. But like so many of these great masters, he would not see it to its end. The baton passed to his successor, Thomas de Cormont. Where Luzerches was the grand strategist, Cormont was the brilliant tactician and the artist of fine detail. He continued the construction with faithful precision, ensuring the vision remained intact, but he also left a personal and deeply intriguing signature. In the nave floor, he installed a vast labyrinth, a circular path of black and white stone nearly 1,000 feet long if walked end to end. For medieval pilgrims, walking the labyrinth on their knees was a substitute for a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, a spiritual journey contained within the cathedral walls. Yet at the center of this maze once lay something extraordinary, brass plaques depicting the portraits of the cathedral's architects, Robert de Luzerches, Thomas de Cormont, and his own son, Renaud, would later succeed him. This was a stunning act of self-commemoration in an age that usually erased the names of builders. It was a declaration that the men behind the miracle deserved to be remembered. Together, their work represents the peak of what we call classic Gothic architecture. Amiens achieves a sublime equilibrium, a perfect middle point between the muscular solidity of early Gothic and the delicate, almost fragile lightness of the later Rhénan style that would follow in Paris. Every element, from the towering piers to the delicate tracery of the triforium gallery, works in concert. The cathedral feels complete, resolved, and eternally confident. It is architecture as a perfected idea, a mountain of stone that somehow floats on light, proving that the greatest monuments are often born not from a single hand, but from a chain of genius, each link essential to holding the entire vision aloft. But for all the grandeur of Amiens, a new aesthetic was already shimmering into being, one that sought not just harmony, but sheer radiance. This is the world of Rhayanite Gothic, and to understand it, we must meet a man preserved in stone. His name is Hugues Libergier, master mason of the lost abbey of Saint Nicaise in Reims. While his great church was tragically destroyed after the French Revolution, Libergier himself survives, thanks to his own tombstone, which now rests in Reims Cathedral. It is a priceless self-portrait of a medieval architect. The carved figure shows Libergier not as a praying monk, but as a working professional. He stands solemnly, holding two objects that define his life. In one hand is a miniature model of his abbey church, a perfect scale representation of his life's work. In the other, he grips a measuring square, the essential tool of his geometry. This is no anonymous craftsman. This is a man declaring his identity and his pride. He is the architect, the creator, and here is the proof of what he built. The style of that model church is the key to his legacy. Rayonnant, meaning radiating, took the Gothic quest for light to its logical extreme. Think of the solid wall vanishing entirely, replaced by vast windows that are themselves intricate webs of stone tracery. The rose windows became larger and more complex, their patterns resembling radiating sunbursts or unfolding flowers. The goal was no longer just to let light in, but to dissolve the interior into a continuous, luminous space, a vessel of pure, colored atmosphere. Hugues Libergier was a pioneer of this delicate, glittering style in the 13th century. His Saint Nicaise Abbey was celebrated in its time as a masterpiece of this new approach, a building where structure seemed to dematerialize into pattern and light. While we cannot walk its aisles today, his tombstone tells us everything. It confirms that the master mason was now a recognized artist, important enough to be commemorated with the symbols of his own genius. He represents a shift in status, from the anonymous builder to the celebrated author, whose name and tools were worthy of eternal remembrance. In that quiet slab of stone, we see the birth of the architect as a public figure, forever holding the model of the world he made. The radiance of Rayonnant style required a foundation, both literal and spiritual, and that foundation was often laid in darkness. When William of Sens fell from the scaffolds of Canterbury, his dream of a French-style choir hung in the balance. The monks turned to a man known only as William the Englishman. His name was a statement in itself, a declaration of local skill rising to meet an international crisis. His task was immense, to complete the choir and then extend the cathedral eastward to create a new, glorious destination, the Trinity Chapel. This was not just an architectural addition, it was a political and religious necessity designed to house the shrine of the murdered Archbishop Thomas Becket, which had become the most popular pilgrimage site in all of Europe. William the Englishman had to build a setting worthy of a saint. He finished the soaring choir begun by his predecessor, faithfully executing the French Gothic vision. But as he moved east, his own architectural voice emerged. The Trinity Chapel is a corona of light, a rounded apse with tall, elegant windows that bathe the saint's intended resting place in luminosity. It feels like a jeweled casket made of stone and glass, a fitting climax to the pilgrim's long journey. Yet William's most profound genius lies beneath the pilgrim's feet, in the solution to a stubborn, earthly problem. The ground at the eastern end of Canterbury sloped sharply. Instead of fighting this terrain, William the Englishman embraced it, engineering a magnificent double-level crypt. This vast underground space is a world apart. To enter it is to leave the light-filled splendor above and descend into a shadowy, primal forest of stone. Dozens of stout columns, arranged in dense rows, support the weight of the entire chapel overhead. The air is cool and still, the scale intimate yet powerful. This crypt provided essential foundational support, but it also served a brilliant symbolic purpose. It became the initial resting place for Becket's shrine, allowing the common pilgrims to venerate the martyr directly in this atmospheric cavern, while the glittering Trinity Chapel above was reserved for the clergy and nobility. The mystery of William the Englishman deepens when we consider his style. His name suggests a local craftsman, yet his work shows a sophisticated understanding of the latest French Gothic trends. Was he an English mason who had traveled extensively in France, absorbing the techniques at their source? Or was he, perhaps, a Norman from the English king's continental territories, earning his nickname simply by working on English soil? The records are silent. He remains a ghost defined by his work, a man who took a foreign vision, anchored it to English land with a stroke of engineering brilliance, and in the quiet darkness of his crypt, created one of the most spiritually charged spaces of the medieval world. That descent into the shadowy crypt at Canterbury leads us upward, into a final explosion of light and stone that would define the last great breath of English Gothic. By the late 15th century, the style had evolved into its most ornate and confident form, the perpendicular, and its ultimate master was John Wassail. His career bridges the medieval and Renaissance worlds, and his masterpiece is a ceiling that seems to defy the very laws of gravity. Enter King's College Chapel in Cambridge. You look up, and the rational world falls away. What hangs above you is not a ceiling, it is a frozen stone blossom, a petrified canopy of impossible delicacy. This is the fan vault, and Wassail was its undisputed genius. The engineering is a marvel of precise geometry. Picture a series of stone half-cones hanging from the roof. From a central point on each pillar, dozens of identical curving stone ribs radiate outward and upward, fanning across the vault like the spokes of a palm leaf or an opening seashell. These ribs are not just decoration, they are the structure itself, a distributed network of strength that allows the spaces between them to be filled with thin, decorative panels. The result is a ceiling that appears weightless, a continuous tapestry of stone lace that stretches the entire breathtaking length of the chapel, uninterrupted by heavy transverse arches. It is the architectural equivalent of a sustained, perfect chord, a single glorious note held for over 280 feet. Wassail did not invent fan vaulting, but at King's College Chapel, he perfected it, creating what is still considered the largest and most magnificent example in the world. It feels less like a roof and more like a vision of heaven's own architecture, a stone sky that permanently celebrates the triumph of human craftsmanship. But Wassail's expertise was not confined to this one sublime space. He was a sought-after master, called to work on the very cathedral where William the Englishman had labored centuries before. At Canterbury, Wassail was responsible for completing the central tower, known as the Bell Harry Tower. He crowned this great landmark with its distinctive octagonal lantern and flying buttresses, finishing a project that had stalled for decades and finally giving the cathedral the majestic central focus it had always needed. His touch can be seen in other great churches like Peterborough and Bath, making him a defining figure of late medieval English architecture. His career represents a fascinating moment. He worked on the very cusp of the Renaissance, yet his style is the final, flamboyant flowering of the native Gothic tradition. In King's College Chapel, you see medieval structural logic pushed to its most spectacular decorative conclusion. There is a confident extravagance to it, a sense that the builders had mastered their craft so completely they could make stone behave like lace or folded paper. Wassail stands at the end of a long line, from William of Sens to Henry Yeovil, proving that even as new ideas from Italy began to stir, the English Gothic could still produce a masterpiece of unparalleled grandeur, a stone fan vault that seemed to capture light and hold it aloft forever. Yet even the perfect fan vault of King's College Chapel was not the final word in stone's defiance of gravity. In the heart of Central Europe, another architect was making stone dance in ways that seemed almost alive. His name was Benedict Ride, and he worked in the twilight of the Gothic age, at the vibrant crossroads where medieval complexity met the clean lines of the Renaissance. His canvas was Prague Castle, and his masterpiece is a room that feels less like a hall and more like a petrified forest in motion. Step inside Vladislav Hall, and your eye is immediately stolen by the ceiling. You do not see the orderly fan vaults of England or the net vaults of the parlors. Instead, you witness something wild and organic. The stone ribs do not form neat geometric patterns. They twist and coil around each other like a bundle of immense, sinewy branches. They spiral into helices, intersect in unpredictable knots, and flow across the vast space in undulating waves. This is the Jagiellonian style, and it is Gothic virtuosity pushed to its most expressive, almost surreal limit. The vaulting has a sense of frozen energy, as if the stone captured the very moment of its own growth. It is architecture that feels dynamic, not static, a celebration of the mason's ability to make the most rigid material appear supple and full of life. This hall was not built for quiet prayer, but for roaring pageantry. It was the grand setting for coronation feasts, nightly tournaments, and royal audiences, a space where the drama of the ceiling matched the drama of courtly life. Ryde's genius, however, was not limited to breathtaking interiors. He was also master of the grim science of defense. As the castle's fortification engineer, he faced the new threat of gunpowder artillery. His answer was to design some of the most advanced defensive systems of his time. He thickened walls, built massive, rounded bastions that could deflect cannonballs, and created complex networks of gates and killing zones. At the Daliborka Tower, he integrated a deep, circular gunport system, allowing defenders to cover every angle of approach with devastating crossfire. He understood that the castle needed to be both a magnificent palace and an impregnable fortress, and he excelled at both demands. This duality is the key to Benedict Ryde's legacy. He seamlessly blended the late Gothic's love for intricate, virtuosic stonework with the emerging Renaissance fascination with harmony, proportion, and classical motif. Look closely at the supports in Vladislav Hall, and you might find a column capital carved not with Gothic foliage, but with a classical egg and dart pattern. He imported Italian stonemasons to work alongside local Gothic craftsmen, creating a unique fusion. His work did not reject the past, but evolved it, forging a distinctly Central European architectural language that was both fiercely local and boldly forward-looking. In his halls, the medieval world's final, most flamboyant statement meets the quiet dawn of a new era, proving that the greatest transitions are not ruptures, but breathtaking conversations held in stone. While Benedict Ryde made fortresses beautiful, the purest expression of military architecture served a single, brutal purpose: to keep people alive under siege. This was the world of Eudes de Montreal, a name often lost in the shadow of his more famous contemporary, Pierre, but Eudes was no cathedral builder. He held the formidable title of Engineer of the King, and his client was Saint Louis himself, King Louis IX of France. His canvas was not light and space, but mud, mortar, and mortal threat. When Louis took the cross for the Seventh Crusade, his dream of reclaiming Jerusalem required a launchpad, a port entirely under royal control on the Mediterranean coast. The site he chose was a marshy, mosquito-ridden lagoon near the Rhone River, a place called Aigues Mortes, meaning dead waters. It was here that Eudes de Montreal's genius was put to the test. His task was not to reach for heaven, but to anchor a fortress to hellish ground. Building on a swamp presented a nightmare of logistics. The soft, saturated earth could not support the weight of immense stone walls. Eudes' first and most invisible masterpiece was the foundation. He likely oversaw armies of laborers driving thousands of wooden piles, great tree trunks hammered deep into the muck until they hit solid ground. On this unstable forest, a stable platform of timber and rubble was built, creating an artificial island of strength upon which the stone could rise. Only then could the walls begin, and what walls they were. The fortifications of Aigues Mortes are a textbook of 13th century military design. The entire city is a perfect rectangle, enclosed by a continuous curtain wall punctuated by massive round towers. This geometry was not for aesthetics, it was for defense. The straight walls allowed for clear lines of sight and overlapping fields of fire. Archers and crossbowmen on one tower could cover the blind spots of the next. The towers themselves, like the formidable Tour de Constance, were not just sentry posts, they were independent strongholds, with their own wells, supplies, and fortified entrances high above ground level. Each tower could hold out even if the curtain wall was breached. Every detail served a function. The machicolations, those stone galleries projecting from the top of the walls, allowed defenders to drop rocks or boiling liquid directly onto attackers at the base. The narrow, slit windows were wide enough to shoot from, but too small for an enemy arrow to enter. You'd designed a machine for war, a stark, powerful expression of stone that communicated one message to any who approached: you shall not pass. This was architecture as a strategic instrument, built to protect a king's ambition and the thousands of souls who would sail with him. While we see no fan vaults or rose windows here, the sheer, uncompromising logic of Aigues Mortes represents a different pinnacle of medieval genius, one where beauty is found in perfect utility and the grim certainty of survival. The stark geometry of Aigues Mortes was a fortress of its time, but a new weapon was about to shatter its logic. The thunder of cannon fire changed everything, and the man who first codified the answer was not just a soldier, but a true Renaissance mind rooted in medieval soil. Francesco di Giorgio Martini was a Sienese polymath, a painter, sculptor, and writer whose greatest impact came from his work as a military engineer. In an age of specialization, he was a master of everything, and he poured this vast knowledge into a revolutionary manuscript, his treatise on architecture, engineering, and the art of war. This handwritten book became a secret weapon itself, circulating among princes and generals, a blueprint for surviving the age of artillery. His central insight was brutal and beautiful. The high, straight walls and round towers of castles like Aigues Mortes were now death traps. A cannonball striking a curved surface could glance off, but one hitting a flat wall transferred all its horrific energy, cracking the masonry. And a round tower still had blind spots where attackers could shelter from defensive fire. Francesco di Giorgio's solution was to turn the fortress inside out. He designed the bastion, a low, thick, angular projection that became the cornerstone of the Trace Italian, or star fortress. Picture a 5-pointed star made of stone and earth. Each point of the star is a massive, triangular bastion. Their slanted sides are designed to deflect cannonballs, and their sharp angles ensure that every inch of ground in front of the walls is covered by fire from another bastion. There were no more shadows for an enemy to hide in. The entire approach became a killing field swept by crossfire. This is not just a new wall, it was a new kind of space, a geometric web of calculated death that transformed the landscape itself into a defensive weapon. But Francesco di Giorgio's vision extended beyond the fortress walls to the city it protected. He was one of the first to conceive of the ideal city as a unified military machine. His planned city layouts were often radial or polygonal, with wide, straight streets leading directly from fortified gates to a central piazza. This allowed for the rapid movement of troops to any breach. Every element, from the slope of a street to the placement of a church, was considered for both daily life and grim necessity. His ideas, captured in those meticulous manuscript drawings, bridged two worlds. They took the medieval imperative for defense and fused it with the Renaissance tools of geometry, perspective, and systematic thought. He did not just build castles, he wrote the textbook that would define fortress design for the next 300 years, influencing engineers from the Netherlands to the New World. In his work, the medieval wall evolved into a rational, mathematical diagram, proving that the greatest defense against oblivion is not just stone, but an idea. But the geometric warfare of Francesco di Giorgio was a world away from the sacred ambitions of an English king. In the year 1245, King Henry III of England looked upon the ancient Westminster Abbey, the coronation church of his dynasty, and found it wanting. It was a heavy, old-fashioned Norman building, a relic of a conquered past. Henry dreamed of a new abbey, one that would rival the great cathedrals of France, a statement in stone that would proclaim his piety, his power, and his connection to the wider currents of European culture. To realize this vision, he reached across the Channel and summoned a master. His name was Henry de Reims, and his very name suggests a profound connection to the city of Reims, the coronation cathedral of the French kings. This was a deliberate, symbolic choice. Henry de Reims arrived not just as a builder, but as an emissary of a new architectural gospel. His mission was to erase the old Norman abbey and raise in its place a monument of pure, radiant French Gothic. Walking through the eastern parts of Westminster Abbey today, you can still feel his imported vision, the soaring height of the choir, the delicate clusters of slender columns, and the intricate bar tracery of the windows all speak a language learned at Rheims. The influence is most crystalline in the abbey's magnificent chapter house, an octagonal room of breathtaking lightness. Its central pillar sends out ribs like stone branches, holding up a vault that feels impossibly delicate. The walls are almost entirely vast windows, flooding the space with the kind of luminous grace found in the chapels of Rheims Cathedral. This was England, but it was England reimagined through French eyes and French tools. Yet this grand import raises a compelling mystery. Why would an English king, often at odds with France, choose to rebuild his most important church in the style of his rivals? The answer is a layered political statement. For Henry III, this was not an act of cultural submission, but of sophisticated appropriation. By adopting the latest French style, he was asserting his place in the mainstream of European royalty. He was saying that the English crown was not a provincial power, but a player on the continental stage, as pious and as cultured as the court of St. Louis. The abbey was to be a beacon of modern sanctity, proving his devotion was as current and cosmopolitan as any monarch's. It transformed Westminster from a national shrine into an international one. But the story of the abbey's construction is itself a puzzle. Henry de Raines is credited as the master mason from 1245 to 1253, but a project of this scale took decades. Records show other masters taking the lead after him, notably John of Gloucester and later, Robert of Beverley. So what was Henry de Raines' true role? Was he the sole author of the design, setting a template that others merely followed? Or was he more of a founding director, establishing the French-inspired style and the initial plan, while leaving the immense task of execution to a succession of talented English masons? The truth likely lies in between. He provided the seminal vision, the architectural DNA of the new abbey, but the long, complex reality of construction, adapting that vision to local materials, budgets, and the king's changing whims, fell to a committee of masters across generations. This makes Westminster Abbey a unique architectural document. It is not the pure expression of one man's mind, like the fan vault of John Wassell. It is a hybrid, a French dream slowly translated into English stone by many hands. In its walls, we see the tension between a king's desire for a foreign ideal and the practical, persistent genius of the local craftsmen who made it a permanent part of their own skyline. Henry de Raines may have drawn the first line, but the abbey itself is a conversation, one that asked whether a nation's heart could be rebuilt in another country's image. The conversation between French vision and English stone found a powerful resolution in the work of William Winford. He stands as a pillar of the perpendicular Gothic movement, the master mason who helped translate its principles from royal projects into the very fabric of southern England. His career was inextricably linked to one of the most powerful men in the kingdom, William of Wykeham, Bishop of Winchester, and twice Lord Chancellor of England. For a bishop-statesman like Wykeham, building was an extension of power and piety, and he entrusted his grandest visions to Winford. Their collaboration produced two landmarks that perfectly embody the perpendicular ideal. The first was Winchester College, founded in 1382, one of England's earliest and most prestigious schools. Winford designed not just a school, but an entire scholarly community. The buildings are arranged around tranquil quadrangles, with living quarters, a chapel, and a magnificent hall. The style is disciplined and elegant, favoring clean lines and spacious windows. It was architecture meant to inspire learning through order and light, a far cry from the cramped, dark spaces of older institutions. But Winford's true architectural symphony was played in the nave of Winchester Cathedral itself. His task there was not to build from scratch, but to perform a breathtaking act of transformation. The existing Norman nave was a classic example of heavy, rounded architecture, with thick pillars and small, high windows. Winford embarked on a radical remodeling. He encased the old Norman piers in new stone, recarving them into the slender, vertical clusters that define perpendicular style. He then raised the walls and clerestory, replacing the dark stone with vast expanses of glass. The result is a space that feels utterly unified and serene. Your eye is drawn upward by the relentless vertical lines of the piers, which flow uninterrupted into the delicate stone tracery of the vault. The walls become grids of light, with large, paneled windows divided by thin stone mullions. This creates a sense of structured luminosity, a calm, rational beauty that feels both majestic and intimate. Winford's genius lay in this harmonious uniformity. He suppressed complex ornament in favor of a grand, repeating rhythm, making the entire nave feel like a single, soaring thought expressed in stone and glass. What makes William Winford truly pivotal, however, is the scale of his influence. He enjoyed an exceptionally long and productive career, serving as the King's master mason after Henry Yeovil and working on projects like Westminster Hall and Windsor Castle. This longevity and his high-profile work for Bishop Wykeham placed him at the center of a building network. He became a teacher and an employer, training a generation of masons in his methods and aesthetic. Through these men, the Winford style, with its emphasis on vertical lines, paneled windows, and rational clarity, became a standardized template. It spread from cathedral closes to parish churches, from Oxford colleges to manor houses across southern England. He did not just design buildings, he helped create a shared architectural language. In an age before printed blueprints, William Winford's legacy was a school of craftsmen who carried his principles in their hands and minds, ensuring that the clear, confident light of perpendicular Gothic would define the English landscape for a century to come. The clear lines of perpendicular Gothic spoke of order and light, but on the sun-baked frontiers of the Venetian Republic, architecture had to speak a sterner language. Here, beauty was measured in resistance, and the man who perfected that grammar was Michele Sanmicheli. Born in Verona in the late 1400s, he was a Renaissance architect whose soul was forged in the medieval furnace of fortification. Venice, a maritime empire with vulnerable land borders, faced a constant threat from the armies of Europe and the Ottoman Empire. They needed not palaces, but impregnable shields, and they found their master engineer in Sanmicheli. His genius lay in evolution, not revolution. He took the centuries-old principles of the castle keep and the curtain wall and re-engineered them for the age of the cannon, creating defenses that were both brutally effective and unexpectedly majestic. Nowhere is this duality more striking than in the city gates he designed for his hometown of Verona. The Porta Nuova is not merely an entrance, it is a calculated statement of power. As you approach, you first confront its sheer, intimidating presence. The lower portion is built of massive, rusticated stone grate blocks with deeply recessed joints and rough-hewn faces. This rustication was not just for show. It gave the wall a textured, mountainous quality, making it harder for siege ladders to gain purchase and absorbing the impact of artillery shot more effectively than smooth stone. Above this formidable base, the architecture transitions. Elegant Doric columns and a classical pediment frame the actual gateway, a nod to the Renaissance ideals of proportion and harmony. But look closer. That graceful pediment is flanked by two fierce stone lions, symbols of Venetian authority, and above the arch itself, hidden from casual view, are the murder holes openings through which defenders could rain down rocks, boiling oil, or worse on anyone attempting to breach the doors. This is Sanmicheli's signature blend, the mind of a classical architect applied to the grim problems of medieval warfare. He designed each gate as part of a larger defensive ecosystem. The Porta Palio, another of his Veronese masterpieces, features a facade that curves outward. This innovative shape allowed defenders on the flanking bastions to sweep the entire front of the gate with crossfire, eliminating any dead ground where attackers could shelter. He understood that a gate was the weakest point in any wall, and so he turned it into a death trap, a concentrated node of defensive ingenuity. Sanmicheli's work represents the logical, magnificent culmination of 1,000 years of castle design. He stood at the end of a lineage that stretched from the simple motte and bailey keeps to the geometric star forts, taking the lessons of Eudes de Montreuil and the theories of Francesco di Giorgio and rendering them in stone on an imperial scale. His fortifications in Crete, Cyprus, and throughout the Venetian terra firma were the state of the art, delaying the inevitable decline of the Republic for generations. In his gates, we see the medieval architect's final metamorphosis, from builder of sacred spaces to a designer of sovereign thresholds, where every classical column casts a long, defensive shadow. The gates of Verona stood as monuments to earthly power, but the most enduring power of all was that of a dynasty. While Michel Sanmicheli fortified borders, two other masters were building a dynasty of a different kind within the very heart of English royalty. Their names are John of Gloucester and Robert of Beverley, and they are the quiet, indispensable successors who turned a king's imported dream into a permanent home. After Henry de Reims set the French-inspired vision for Westminster Abbey, the monumental task of actually building it fell to men like these. They were not just masons, they held the formidable title of King's Mason, a role that made them the chief executives of the crown's architectural ambition. John of Gloucester appears in the royal accounts from the 1250s onward, a trusted figure in the court of Henry III. He likely took over the day-to-day direction at Westminster Abbey after Henry de Reims, and his responsibility was immense. He oversaw the construction of the Abbey's magnificent north transept, a project that required not only technical skill, but also a deep understanding of the delicate Gothic style the king demanded. But his work extended far beyond the sacred walls. As the king's mason, John was a master of both worlds. He applied his skills to the Tower of London, strengthening and expanding the royal fortress. He worked on Westminster Palace, the seat of government, ensuring its halls and chambers were fit for a monarch. This duality is key. For John of Gloucester, there was no sharp divide between building for God and building for the king. Both required the same precision, the same grandeur, and the same statement of enduring authority. He was managing a portfolio of national importance, moving from a cathedral choir to a castle dungeon with the same steady administrative genius. Decades later, that same tradition of royal service was upheld by Robert of Beverley. Active in the late 13th century under King Edward I, Beverley continued the work at Westminster Abbey, bringing his own era's sensibilities to the project. His most dazzling and mysterious contribution lies at the very foot of the altar. It is the great pavement, a breathtaking floor of inlaid stone and glass set before the high altar, crafted in the Cosmati style. This was an exotic art form, originating from Italian craftsmen in Rome, involving intricate geometric patterns made from thousands of tiny pieces of colored marble, porphyry, and glass, set into a complex web of brass strips. The design is a labyrinth of circles, squares, and quatrefoils, shimmering with deep reds, greens, and golds. To walk upon it is to tread on a vast, cryptic diagram. Scholars believe it is a cosmological map, a representation of the universe and time itself, with its patterns symbolizing the eternal order of creation. The fact that Robert of Beverley oversaw or executed this work speaks volumes. It shows the English court was still looking beyond its shores, not to France this time, but to Rome, weaving another layer of international prestige into the Abbey's fabric. Like John of Gloucester before him, Robert's duties were not confined to the Abbey. He too served as a king's mason, working on the royal palaces, and perhaps even on early plans for Edward I's great chain of castles in Wales. Together, these two men represent the vital, often overlooked middle management of medieval genius. They were the stewards. They took the foundational style set by a visionary like Henry de Reims and shepherded it through decades of construction, adapting it, refining it, and ensuring its survival through changes in monarchs and taste. They were the practical link between the king's boundless ambition and the slow, patient reality of stone. In their hands, architecture became a continuous thread, weaving the sacred and the sovereign into a single, unbreakable tapestry of state. The shimmering parlor style did not spring fully formed from the Bohemian stone. Before Peter Parlor could weave his net vaults, a different architect laid the essential, sober groundwork. Emperor Charles IV, determined to make Prague a beacon of imperial power, first turned to a master from the west, a Frenchman named Matthew of Arras. In the year 1344, Matthew arrived with a clear mandate to build a cathedral worthy of a Holy Roman Emperor, and he brought with him the established, authoritative language of French Gothic. His plan for St. Vitus was a model of classical rigor. He designed a cathedral with a long choir, an ambulatory with radiating chapels, and a forest of flying buttresses, all following the proven principles of cathedrals like Narbonne or Rodez in his homeland. If you look at the lower portions of the choir today, you can still see Matthew's hand. The masonry is precise, the proportions are balanced, and the structural logic is impeccably clear. He built the foundational walls and the sturdy, graceful columns that would support everything to come. His was an architecture of order and tradition, a solid and learned statement meant to anchor the Bohemian capital to the great architectural lineage of Western Europe. But Matthew of Arras died in 1352, with only the choir's lower walls completed. The emperor faced a choice: find another French master to finish the textbook design or seek a new vision. He chose the latter, appointing the young Peter Parler, then only in his early 20s. This decision would transform the cathedral, and with it, the architectural identity of Central Europe. Where Matthew's plan was a faithful translation, Peter's execution was a brilliant reinvention. He respected the foundational geometry laid out by his predecessor, but he began to infuse it with a new spirit as the walls rose. The columns, instead of remaining simple cylinders, blossomed into complex bundles of shafts. The vaulting, instead of following standard rib patterns, exploded into that signature net of interlocking decorative rib. The triforium gallery was no longer a simple arcade, but became a richly sculpted procession of busts, a portrait gallery of the royal family, courtiers, and the architects themselves. This was the birth of the parlor style, a shift from French formalism to a more plastic, sculptural, and inventive approach. Stone was no longer just a structural material, it was a medium for personal expression and dynamic form. The comparison between the two masters is etched into the cathedral's very fabric. Matthew of Arras provided the disciplined sentence, the correct grammatical structure. Peter Parler took that sentence and wrote a breathtaking poem with it, full of rhythm, surprise, and ornament. This dramatic shift shows us the profound power a single architect could wield. The change in creative leadership did not just alter a building's decoration, it redirected its entire soul, transforming a monument of imported tradition into a soaring declaration of local genius and imperial ambition. The shift from a single cathedral to an entire ring of stone reveals a new scale of architectural ambition. In the late 13th century, King Edward I of England faced a stubborn problem: the rebellious, mountainous land of Wales. His solution was not just an army, but a building campaign of terrifying ambition, a chain of fortresses known as the Iron Ring. And to build them, he imported a master from the continent, a man named James of St. George. Hailing from Savoy, a region famed for its advanced castle design, James was not merely a mason, he was a specialist in a revolutionary defensive concept, the concentric castle. His arrival in Wales marked the dawn of a new era in military architecture, where a fortress was not just a stronghold, but a deadly geometric machine. His masterpieces, castles like Harlech, Conwy, Beaumaris, and Caernarfon, still crouch along the Welsh coast, their ruined walls whispering of a brilliant, brutal logic. The principle of concentric defense is simple in theory, but devastating in practice. Picture not one wall, but 2, 3, or even 4, each one higher than the last, nested inside one another like stone onion. The outer wall is lower, so defenders on the inner, taller walls can fire over the heads of their own comrades to rain arrows and stones down on any attackers who breach the first line. The space between these walls is the killing ground, a trapped corridor with death coming from every direction. There is no shelter, no safe angle of approach. Every gatehouse becomes a fortress in itself, a labyrinth of portcullises, murder holes, and twisting passages designed to funnel enemies into ever tighter spaces where they could be eliminated. At Harlech Castle, perched on a sheer cliff, James used the natural landscape as his first and greatest wall. At Conwy, he built not just a castle, but an entire walled town, integrating the fortress into a larger system of control. But his ultimate, unfinished masterpiece is Beaumaris on the Isle of Anglesey. Often called the perfect concentric castle, its symmetry is chilling, a low outer curtain wall, perfectly rectangular, surrounds a higher, mighty inner wall with massive round towers at each corner. It is surrounded by a water-filled moat, fed by the sea. The entire design is a study in geometric perfection, with every tower covering its neighbor and every approach covered by overlapping fields of fire. Building these stone giants in a hostile, newly conquered land was a logistical feat as impressive as the military design. James of St. George oversaw an army of laborers, quarrymen, and craftsmen, 1,000 strong. He organized supply lines that stretched across England, shipping timber from distant forests, iron from the Midlands, and stone from local quarries. He managed payrolls and schedules under the constant threat of Welsh raids. The castles were not just built to withstand a siege, they were built during a perpetual state of siege. Yet their purpose was dual. They were, of course, impregnable fortresses from which English troops could dominate the countryside, but they were also symbols carved in rock. Their sheer alien scale, their unfamiliar geometric forms, were a constant, oppressive reminder of English power. They were psychological weapons, meant to crush the spirit of rebellion by demonstrating a technological and organizational supremacy that the Welsh could not match. James of St. George was more than an architect. He was a general of logistics and a psychologist of stone, building the very apparatus of conquest with a draftsman's precision and a conqueror's resolve. Stone fortresses like Harlech were instruments of control, but the most lasting control is over the mind itself. While James of St. George was subduing Wales with walls, another William was building a different kind of empire, one of learning and piety, from his seat in Winchester. William of Wykeham was a bishop, a statesman who served as Lord Chancellor to 2 kings, and a man of immense personal wealth. He was not a mason who laid stone, but he was an architect in the truest sense, a patron whose vision and resources could will entire worlds into being. His legacy is carved not in defensive geometry, but in the serene quadrangles of England's first great schools. His masterstroke was the founding of New College, Oxford, in 1379, followed by Winchester College in 1382. These were not mere additions to existing institutions. They were revolutionary concepts built from the ground up. Before Wykeham, scholars often lived in scattered, makeshift lodgings. He envisioned something entirely new, a self-contained academic community. He commissioned a unified architectural plan where everything had its purpose and place: dormitories, a dining hall, a chapel, and a library, all arranged around peaceful, cloistered courtyards. This was the birth of the collegiate quadrangle as we know it, a model of ordered life designed to foster scholarship and devotion away from the distractions of the town. But a vision this precise requires a master's hand to execute. William of Wykeham knew that, and his genius lay in his choice of collaborator. He appointed William Winford as his chief master mason, entrusting him with the translation of this educational ideal into stone. The partnership was perfect. Winford's clean, vertical perpendicular Gothic style provided the aesthetic, a disciplined, luminous architecture that reflected the intellectual and spiritual clarity the bishop sought. Every detail, from the proportions of the chapel to the layout of the latrines, was overseen by Wykeham with meticulous attention. He was not a distant financier. He was a hands-on CEO of construction, reviewing plans, approving expenses, and ensuring the final product embodied his exacting standards. The colleges were his theological statement made physical. They were engines for training a new generation of priests and administrators, loyal to both church and crown, who would uphold the order of the realm. In this, William of Wykeham represents a powerful and often overlooked force in medieval architecture, the patron as co-author. The great buildings of the age were dialogues between the man with the dream and the man with the trowel. Wykeham provided the why, the funding, and the overarching purpose. Winford provided the how, the structural genius, and the daily supervision of craftsmen. Together, they proved that architecture could be a tool for social engineering, shaping character as deliberately as it shaped space. The quiet quadrangles of Oxford and Winchester, so different from the grim towers of Wales, stand as monuments to a different kind of power, the power to build not just walls, but mind. The serene quadrangles of Winchester College are a world away from the marshy, windswept fens of eastern England. Here, at Ely Cathedral, an architect faced not a philosophical challenge, but a catastrophic physical one. On the night of February 12, 1322, the massive Norman central tower of the cathedral simply gave way. Centuries of stone, the very heart of the great church, collapsed into the crossing below in a thunderous roar of rubble and dust. For the monks of Ely, it was a spiritual and practical disaster. Their church was maimed, its central space open to the sky, a gaping wound where the tower had once stood. Rebuilding it would demand not just skill, but a radical leap of imagination. The man who provided that leap was the cathedral's master mason, Reginald of Ely. His solution was so audacious, so contrary to all convention, that it remains one of the single greatest feats of medieval structural engineering. He decided not to rebuild a stone tower at all. Instead, he would crown the cathedral with something the world had never seen, a vast, 8-sided wooden lantern, supported by a framework of such complexity and strength it seemed to defy logic. This was the birth of the Ely octagon. Imagine the scale of the problem. The crossing below was a square, left by the 4 great piers that had supported the old tower. The first step was to bridge this enormous square gap, each side over 70 feet across. Reginald's genius was to transform that square into an octagon. He built 8 immense oak posts, each one a single tree trunk over 60 feet long and 3 feet thick. These were not simply stood upright, they were angled inward, leaning toward the center of the space, creating a stable, funnel-like form. To connect these giants, he constructed a complex web of horizontal beams and diagonal braces, a 3-dimensional lattice of oak that locked the entire structure together into one rigid, interdependent unit. This wooden cage became the foundation for the most breathtaking part, the lantern itself. This is not a solid tower, but an open framework of timber and glass, a crystalline crown that sits upon the octagon, flooding the space below with light from all sides. The engineering is a masterpiece of medieval carpentry, using techniques more common in shipbuilding or bridge construction. The joints between the massive timbers are not held by nails or metal plates, but by mortise and tenon joints pegged together with wooden dowels. The entire structure is a lesson in balance and distributed weight, each piece supporting the next, transferring the colossal load down through the 8 posts to the stone piers below. For 700 years, through storms, settling, and the passage of countless feet, this wooden mountain has held. The types of timber tell a story of immense resource management. The primary posts are English oak, chosen for its strength and durability, but recent studies have found other woods within the structure, like Baltic oak, suggesting Reginald sourced materials from across Northern Europe, assembling a kit of parts from a vast trade network to fulfill his singular vision. The mystery that lingers is one of authorship. While Reginald of Ely is credited as the master mason, the octagon is fundamentally a work of carpentry on a cathedral scale. Did he design every intricate joint himself, or did he collaborate closely with a master carpenter whose name is lost to history? The structure itself suggests a profound conversation between the mason's understanding of geometry and space and the carpenter's intimate knowledge of timber and tension. Reginald's courage was to see that the solution to a stone catastrophe lay not in more stone, but in the living strength of the forest. He created a space that feels both monumental and intimate, a wooden sky that invites the heavens directly into the heart of the church. In doing so, he left a permanent question hanging in the air, a testament to the moment when medieval builders looked at a pile of rubble and dared to dream in an entirely new material. The audacious wooden octagon at Ely stands as a monument to a single, brilliant mind, but for centuries, minds like Reginald's were destined to be forgotten. The master masons who carved the medieval skyline worked in a world that rarely recorded their names, their lives vanishing into the very stone they shaped. Our ability to speak of William of Sens or Henry Yevel today is not a gift from the Middle Ages, but the hard-won prize of a different kind of 20th century genius. His name was John Harvey, and he was not a builder of cathedrals, but a builder of biographies, an architectural historian who became the ultimate scholar detective. Before Harvey began his work in the 1930s, the study of medieval architecture was often a story of styles and periods. of anonymous buildings that seemed to spring from the ground by collective will. The craftsmen were ghosts. Harvey changed all of that. He realized that the truth was not lost, it was buried, hidden in plain sight within thousands of dusty, unglamorous documents. His crime scene was the archive, and his evidence was the medieval account roll, the building contract, the payment receipt, and the court record. While others looked up at vaults, Harvey spent decades with his head bent over manuscripts, squinting at faded Latin script in the records of the British Exchequer, in cathedral chapter archives, and in private estate papers. He was searching for the financial fingerprints of the builders, a payment for wages to a specific master mason at a certain date, a contract specifying the design of a window or a tower, a record of a gift of land or a pardon granted to a craftsman. Piece by tiny piece, Harvey began to assemble these fragments into coherent lives. He cross-referenced names with known building campaigns, matching stylistic quirks in stone to the documented presence of a particular master. If a certain type of window tracery appeared in Gloucester Abbey in 1390, and a mason named John Smith was on the payroll that exact year, a connection sparked to life. Through this meticulous, painstaking work, shadows began to take solid form. He rescued figures like Henry Yeovil from being mere names on a list, reconstructing their careers, their networks, and their astonishing influence. He proved that William Winford was not just a style, but a man with a workshop, a family, and a legacy. Harvey's methods revolutionized the field. He showed that architectural history was not just about aesthetics, it was about economics, logistics, and human ambition. His books, especially his seminal works like English Medieval Architects and The Perpendicular Style, became the foundational texts. They were not dry catalogs, they were recovery projects, giving back to history the men who had been its most visible creators. In a very real sense, John Harvey built the bridge we are walking across right now. Every name explored in this script, every story of a fall from scaffolding or a clever vault design, is a story he helped to recover from the silence. He taught us that behind every anonymous wall was a person with a name, a family to feed, and a unique vision to impose upon the world. His legacy is a profound reminder that history is not just about the monuments that survive, but about the fragile human stories we must actively choose to remember. The meticulous detective work of John Harvey reveals names, but it cannot fully capture the silent world that shaped them. To understand how a William Winford or a Henry Yeovil could rise, we must step inside the institution that forged them, the medieval mason's lodge. This was far more than a simple workshop. Picture a vast, cluttered hall attached to a cathedral construction site, perpetually dusted with stone powder. Within its walls, the lodge functioned as a design studio, a technical school, a guild hall, and a fraternity, all bound by a common purpose and a culture of profound secrecy. Here, the master was not just a boss, but a teacher, guarding knowledge that was the lifeblood of the craft. The true curriculum was not written in books, but in geometry. To a medieval mason, geometry was not abstract math. It was the sacred language of creation, the divine tool God used to shape the cosmos. They believed that by mastering its principles, they could mirror heavenly order here on earth. This knowledge was passed down through symbolic drawings scratched on tracing floors, plaster tables where full-scale plans were laid out, and through guarded oral tradition. A young apprentice would learn the secret ratios that turned a square into the plan for a nave, or a triangle into the perfect slope for a roof. He would learn the mechanics of the thrust, how the weight of a vault flowed down a rib, through a column, and out along a flying buttress, a hidden river of force that made stone seem weightless. This was power, and it was protected fiercely. The mysteries of the lodge extended to identity itself. For centuries, the master mason was the architect, the designer, and the head of works, but he was first and foremost a supremely skilled stone carver. His authority came from his hands, the gradual shift where a man like Yeovil could become a wealthy administrator who rarely touched a chisel was a slow revolution. It marked the birth of the architect as a separate professional, a mind that conceived forms for others to execute. This transition is hinted at in those rare, enigmatic lodge books, like the one left by Villard de Honnecourt. These were not official manuals, but personal collections, mixing precise architectural diagrams with sketches of animals, machines, and faces. They feel like the private notebooks of intensely curious minds, trying to systemize a world where sacred geometry governed everything from a cathedral's plan to the shape of a rose window. The very existence of such books suggests a desire to preserve and transmit knowledge beyond the lodge's secretive walls. The rituals and symbols of the lodges, some of which would later influence speculative traditions, were a way of encoding this hard-won wisdom, binding the community together, and marking the stages of a mason's journey from apprentice to fellow to master. It was from within this collective, often anonymous, crucible that our 30 renowned figures emerged. They were the exceptional ones who mastered not only the sacred geometry and the craft of their hands, but also the arts of logistics, diplomacy, and patronage. They learned to speak the language of bishops and kings, translating celestial principles into budgets and timelines. The lodge gave them the tools, but their own ambition taught them how to build not just structures, but legacies that would finally carry their names out of the dust of the workshop and into the light of history. The lodge taught geometry, but the chisel could still speak with a personal voice. At Hereford Cathedral in the early 1400s, two successive master masons left a fascinating record of this transition, where a grand architectural campaign was punctuated by moments of quiet, individual artistry. The first was Walter of Hereford, a figure documented in the cathedral's fabric rolls from around 1310. His major task was likely the ambitious rebuilding of the north transept and the central tower, work that embodied the exuberant spirit of the decorated Gothic style. This was the style in full flower, moving beyond the early pointed arches to embrace complexity and fluidity. Under Walter's direction, the stonework would have blossomed with intricate window tracery, where geometric patterns gave way to flowing, curvilinear forms that resembled flickering flames or unfolding petals. Vaults became more elaborate, with extra ribs called tiercerons creating star-like patterns overhead. His work set a new standard of ornate beauty for the cathedral, a statement of the latest fashion in ecclesiastical design. But then, the work passed to another hand, that of Nicholas of Durnford. He succeeded Walter, perhaps upon his death or retirement, and he faced the practical duty of continuing the vision. Yet Nicholas brought something more with him, a signature touch that whispers to us across the centuries. Look closely at the stone capitals and corbels within the cathedral, and you will find a series of captivating carvings that feel different from standard architectural foliage. These are the so-called green men, faces peering out from dense thickets of carved leaves, vines, and flowers. Sometimes the foliage sprouts from their mouths or rides around their heads. They are playful, slightly wild, and deeply naturalistic. These were not part of some grand theological scheme dictated by a bishop. They were likely the personal flourish of the master mason and his carvers. The green man was a potent pre-Christian symbol of rebirth and the natural world, a motif that had been absorbed into church decoration for centuries. But the particular style and placement of these at Hereford feel like an artistic signature. In the midst of a vast, formulaic project governed by geometric rules, here was a pocket of individuality, a chance for the craftsman to leave a mark that said, Nicholas was here. This subtle shift from Walter to Nicholas reveals a crucial truth about these great buildings. We often speak of a cathedral as having a single, unified style, like decorated Gothic. But on the scaffolding, style was a living thing that evolved with each master mason who took charge. Walter established the overall decorative language, but Nicholas interpreted it, perhaps refining the curves of a window or choosing a different pattern for a vault boss. His green men are the most visible clue to this gentle evolution. They show that even within the rigid hierarchy of the lodge and the overwhelming scale of a cathedral, there was room for personal expression. The stones not only tell a story of faith and community, but sometimes, if you know where to look, they tell the quiet, proud story of the hand that carved them. While the green men of Hereford speak of a carver's private world, another English cathedral dared to create a public chamber of breathtaking spatial audacity. Journey north to York Minster, where in the late 13th century, a master mason faced a problem of pure geometry and light. The chapter house, where the cathedral's clergy met daily, needed to be more than a functional room. It needed to be a crown for the entire complex. The name Henry de Snelland appears in the Minster's fragmentary records from this era. a shadowy figure associated with this period of glorious construction. Whether he was the sole author or the leading mind among a team, the result stands as one of the most revolutionary spaces of the entire Gothic age. Step inside, and the first thing you notice is the silence, not of sound, but of structure. The room is a perfect octagon, vast and airy, and your eye searches instinctively for the central column that must hold up the stone sky. It is not there. The entire vault, a complex web of ribs converging on a central boss, floats overhead with no visible support. This was an act of architectural magic that defied every cautious instinct. How did they do it? The secret is a masterpiece of hidden engineering. The weight of the vault is carried not down through the center of the room, but outwards and downwards through the 8 walls themselves. Each wall is massively thick, acting as a colossal pier, and outside, concealed by the building's lower roof, a ring of slender flying buttresses absorbs the outward thrust, channeling the immense forces safely into the ground. The room feels impossibly light because its support has been ingeniously erased, pushed to the perimeter. This creates a sense of unified, boundless space, a single, soaring thought uninterrupted by any physical division. The walls themselves are a celebration of this liberation. They are not solid stone, but vast screens of stained glass, some of the oldest and most complete in England. The glass glows with deep reds, blues, and greens, depicting biblical scenes and saintly legends that would have bathed the gathered canons in a kaleidoscope of colored light during their meetings. Beneath these luminous walls runs a stone bench, and above it, the stone comes alive in a different way. Carved along the canopy work is a riot of naturalistic foliage, vines, oak leaves, and flowers so precise and delicate they seem to have been frozen in mid-growth. This is the world of the woodland, captured in stone with a botanist's eye, a stark and beautiful contrast to the geometric perfection of the vault above. It grounds the heavenly space in the reality of the English countryside. The technical achievement is staggering, but it raises a profound mystery. A project of this daring complexity, with its precise calculations of thrust and load, could not have been the work of a single isolated genius. It speaks of a team, a lodge of master masons, carvers, and glaziers working in perfect concert under a unified vision. Henry de Snellen's name may be the one that survived, but he was undoubtedly the conductor of an orchestra of unknown talent. Who were the mathematicians who worked out the stresses, the carvers who gave each leaf its unique vein, the glaziers who translated light into scripture? Their names are lost, their individual contributions blended into the collective miracle of the space. The York Chapter House, therefore, stands as a dual monument. It is a triumph of individual vision, a spatial idea of breathtaking boldness, but it is equally a testament to the anonymous collective, the medieval lodge operating at its absolute peak, where many hands and minds fuse to create a room that feels less built and more conjured from light, stone, and sheer intellectual courage. The octagon at York is a monument to names we can almost grasp, but history holds deeper silences. For every Henry de Snellen, whose name was scribbled in an account, there were countless others whose contributions were never written down, and among the most profound of these silences is the question of women. The official records of medieval building are a world of men, masters, and masons. Yet to believe women had no hand in shaping the stone world is to misunderstand the medieval world entirely. Their influence operated in powerful, often indirect ways. Beginning with the most direct form of power a woman could wield, patronage, consider Abbess Matilda of Essen in the 10th century. As the leader of one of the most prestigious imperial abbeys in Germany, she commanded vast resources and answered to no male lord. It was she who commissioned the building of the Essen Minster, a cruciform church that housed a miraculous golden statue of the Virgin Mary, and she who donated the famous processional cross that bears her name. Her vision, her treasury, and her authority directed the Masons. In England, queens like Eleanor of Castile, wife of Edward I, were not just consorts, they were active managers of their own estates and incomes. Eleanor's accounts show her personally funding the construction of the elegant Eleanor crosses, the monumental wayside markers erected after her death. While she did not draw the plans, her will and her wealth set the project in motion. deciding that beauty would memorialize her journey. This is architectural power from the top down, a reminder that behind many a great monument stood a patron with the means and the will to make it happen. But what of the craft itself? Could a woman have been a mason? The rigid, guild-controlled world of the lodge seems an impenetrable male fortress. Yet medieval workshops were family businesses centered in the home. A master mason's wife and daughters would have lived and breathed the craft. They would have managed the household finances that paid the journeymen. They might have kept the detailed accounts for materials, and they almost certainly helped run the lodge's practical affairs during a master's absence. In a world where illness or injury could strike at any moment, the survival of a workshop could depend on the business acumen of the woman left in charge. While the physical act of hewing stone at the quarry was male-dominated, other linked crafts had more fluid boundaries. Women are documented as glaziers, painting and leading stained glass, and as embroiderers creating the lavish textiles that adorn the very churches men built. Their artistic vision literally clothed the interior spaces. This suggests a collaborative ecosystem where skill, if not official title, could flow through a household. Then there are the legends, stories that persist like stubborn whispers in the stone. At Strasbourg Cathedral, a compelling tradition speaks of Sabrina von Steinbach. The story says she was the daughter of the cathedral's master mason, Erwin von Steinbach, and that upon his death in the early 14th century, she took over the workshop and was responsible for sculpting the iconic statues of the church and the synagogue that flanked the south transept portal. These are profound, allegorical figures, full of dignity and complex emotion. There is no contemporary document that confirms Sabrina's role, and many historians dismiss her as a later Romantic invention. But why did this particular legend take root? Perhaps it speaks to a deeper truth, that the skill was so extraordinary, so infused with a sensitive understanding, that people later could not believe it was solely the work of men. It is a story that fills a gap in our imagination, acknowledging that genius does not recognize gender, even if the record books do. The mystery of the anonymous women is not a puzzle we can solve with a name on a contract. It is a different kind of historical question, one that asks us to listen to the silence and read between the lines of what was built. It asks us to see the cathedral not just as a structure, but as a social event. The women who funded it, the women who managed the accounts that bought the stone, the women who wove the tapestries and possibly even designed some of the glass, they all participated in the creation of meaning. Their absence from the lodge rolls is a fact of their society, but their absence from the story is a choice of ours. To acknowledge this is to add an essential layer of complexity to the medieval world, understanding that the soaring vaults and towering spires rose not from a society of half its people, but from a whole civilization, even if only one half was allowed to assign its name to the sky. Beaumaris Castle was designed to be perfect, and in its unfinished state, it reveals more than any completed fortress ever could. Modern archaeologists and engineers studying its symmetrical walls and dry moats have uncovered a blueprint for a machine of absolute control. Using ground-penetrating radar and three-dimensional modeling, they can now see the ghost of James of St. George's full intention. The castle's concentric rings are a masterpiece of geometry, but the real genius lies in the invisible systems. His designs incorporated sophisticated underground drainage channels that kept the living quarters dry and the deep moats at a consistent level, fed ingeniously by the tides. The accommodation within the inner ward was planned with a bureaucratic precision, allocating specific spaces for the constable, the garrison, the chapel, and the kitchens, creating a self-sufficient microcity capable of enduring a siege of indefinite length. Every arrow slit, every murder hole, was calculated for overlapping fields of fire, leaving not a single inch of the killing ground unprotected. This was a fortress built by a mind that thought in terms of systems, where human life, water flow, and ballistic trajectories were all variables in a single, devastating equation. The psychological weight of these stone systems on the Welsh landscape cannot be overstated. A castle like Beaumaris or Harlech was not merely a military base, it was a permanent, overwhelming sermon in stone. Its sheer, alien geometry, so different from the native Welsh fortifications, communicated a message of technological and organizational supremacy that was meant to crush the spirit of rebellion. The sight of its perfect, relentless walls, rising from the flat Anglesey plain, was a daily reminder that the old order was erased, replaced by a logic so formidable it seemed to come from another world. It told the conquered population that resistance was not just futile, but irrational against an engine of power this complete. James of St. George was building minds as much as he was building walls, engineering submission through awe and dread. His influence flowed far beyond the Welsh marches. The principles of concentric defense he perfected became the gold standard for royal castle building across Britain for the next century. Elements of his designs can be traced in the great castles of the Scottish borders and in later English fortifications during the 100 Years' War. More subtly, his systematic approach to castle planning, treating a fortress as an integrated unit of defense, accommodation, and supply, influenced military architects across Europe. While the star fort of the Renaissance would eventually supersede the stone castle, the intellectual leap James made from building strong points to designing holistic defensive organisms was profound. He stands as a culminating figure, the medieval military architect who brought the form to its highest expression before gunpowder rendered its walls obsolete. In the silent, geometric perfection of Beaumaris, we see the end of one era and the cold, brilliant dawn of modern military engineering. Those geometric fortresses were built on a language of pure function, but the stones of the great cathedrals often whisper a more personal tongue. Scattered across the interior walls, hidden on the undersides of vaults, or tucked into the corners of windowsills, you can find them tiny, chiseled signatures etched into the medieval dark. They are mason's marks, and they are the closest we can come to touching the hand of an anonymous worker. These are not grand sculptures, but simple, sharp line symbols, a cross within a circle, a downward arrow, a five-pointed star, or a shape like Mason's compass. Their practical purpose was straightforward accounting. In a system where masons were paid by the piece, each finished stone needed to be identified with its carver's unique mark, so the master of the works could tally the work and issue the correct wages. It was a time card punched directly into limestone. Walk through the quarries of Keene in France or the crypt of Canterbury Cathedral, and you will see these same marks repeated, proving that a specific craftsman was responsible for a specific batch of stones from shaping to placement. Yet, the simplicity of the system belies a deeper mystery. Why did some of these symbols bear such a striking resemblance to known esoteric or protective signs? A mark resembling the vesica piscis, the almond shape formed by two overlapping circles, was a profound Christian symbol of the intersection of heaven and earth. A pentacle, or five-pointed star, was a complex symbol representing the five wounds of Christ, but also, in other traditions, a protective charm. Could these have been mere coincidences of geometry, or did the Masons imbue their daily work with a layer of silent, personal devotion or mystical safeguard? The truth likely lives in a gray area. For most, the mark was a pragmatic signature. For a few, perhaps it was also a silent prayer carved into the fabric of the sacred building, a way to claim not just their wage, but their spiritual contribution to a collective act of worship. This practice opens a window into the medieval mind itself, which saw the entire world as a dense web of symbols waiting to be decoded. The Mason's marks are just the smallest part of a vast symbolic language written in stone. The very layout of a cathedral was a theological diagram. The floor plan in the shape of a cross is the most obvious example, a constant reminder of the crucifixion under the feet of every worshiper. The eastward orientation, with the altar facing the rising sun, symbolized the resurrection and the coming of the light of the world. Numbers held divine power. The number 3 for the Trinity echoed everywhere in triple portals, triple lancet windows, and tripartite vault ribs. The number 12 for the apostles might be reflected in the columns of a chapter house. The number 7 for the sacraments and days of creation could govern the levels of a tower. This was not random decoration, it was a conscious encoding of belief into structure. Then, there are the allegorical sculptures that turn the exterior into a stone Bible and a moral lesson book. The grimacing gargoyles are not just waterspouts, they are images of sin and demonic forces being expelled from the holy building. The serene statues of saints lining the portals are a heavenly court, inviting the faithful inward. The lush carvings of vines and wheat in the capitals speak of the fertility of God's creation and the Eucharist. Every element, from the tallest spire pointing to heaven to the crypt buried in the earth, was part of a cosmic map. The ultimate symbolic goal was to make the church a model of the heavenly Jerusalem, the perfect city of God described in the book of Revelation. The glowing stained glass was its jeweled walls. The soaring vaults were its eternal sky. The labyrinth set into the floor of Chartres Cathedral is perhaps the most beautiful expression of this, a symbolic pilgrimage path leading to a celestial center. When you understand this, you realize the architectural plan was far more than an engineering solution. It was a philosophical and theological statement, a three-dimensional sermon intended to educate, inspire, and elevate the soul through physical experience. The master mason, therefore, was not just a builder. He was a theologian in stone, translating the most abstract doctrines of the faith into a space you could walk through, touch, and feel. His blueprint was a sacred script, and every anonymous mark left within it is a punctuation point, a humble signature on a collective letter to the divine. A profound silence fell across the continent, a silence born of empty streets and abandoned fields. The Black Death, arriving in Europe in the 1340s, was more than a medical catastrophe. It was a geological event that shifted the very bedrock of society, and architecture could not escape its shadow. The plague swept away perhaps half of Europe's population, and in its wake, the great building sites of cathedrals and castles fell eerily quiet. The most immediate and tangible impact was on the workforce. Skilled labor became terrifyingly scarce. The master mason, who once commanded a team of 50, might now struggle to find 10 able bodies. This sudden, brutal economics of survival handed an unprecedented advantage to the craftsmen who remained alive. Their specialized knowledge was now a rare commodity. For the first time, skilled masons and carvers could demand higher wages, better conditions, and even greater creative autonomy. The balance of power on the scaffolding tilted, however slightly, from the patron with the purse to the man with the indispensable hands. This new reality may have shaped the careers of masters like Henry Yeovil, who rose to prominence just after the worst waves of the plague. His ability to manage vast projects and complex logistics in an era of chronic labor shortage would have been a form of genius as valuable as his drafting skill, making him utterly indispensable to the crown. This scarcity of hands and wealth also triggered a profound stylistic shift, one you can trace in the very stones. Before the plague, the dominant style in England was the decorated Gothic, a celebration of intricate flowing stonework, with windows full of undulating tracery and vaults dense with extra ribs. It was lavish, time-consuming, and expensive. After the demographic collapse, a new aesthetic emerged, the perpendicular Gothic. Look at the difference. Perpendicular style favored straight, vertical lines, repeated panel-like windows, and simpler, more rational vaults. Was this a purely artistic evolution, or was it, in part, a practical response to catastrophe? Many historians argue it was both. The perpendicular style was arguably cheaper and faster to build. Its repetitive patterns could be taught to a smaller, less experienced workforce. The elaborate, one-of-a-kind carving of the decorated period gave way to more standardized elements. In a world stripped of people and wealth, architecture adapted, favoring clarity, efficiency, and a kind of sober grandeur over flamboyant complexity. It was a style for a chastened age, one that still reached for heaven, but with a more disciplined and economical hand. The psychological scar left by the plague cut even deeper, etching itself into the decorative fabric of the churches themselves. A new and grim genre of art flourished, the memento mori Latin for remember you must die. Where once capitals bloomed with serene foliage and saints, now stone began to whisper of mortality. In the misericords, those little carved seats in choir stalls, you might find a chilling scene, a man wrestling a skeleton, or a corpse being devoured by worms. Grotesque carvings of decaying corpses, known as trancy tombs, appeared on the monuments of the wealthy, showing them not in their regal finery, but as rotting cadavers, a stark reminder of the vanity of earthly glory. This was not mere morbidity. It was a direct, visceral response to a generation that had seen death on an unimaginable scale. The architecture itself became a sermon on the fragility of life, urging the living to focus on spiritual salvation. This context is the essential, somber backdrop for understanding the later masters. When John Wassell designed his breathtaking fan vault for King's College Chapel decades later, he was working in a world forever marked by this collective trauma. His vault is not a celebration of earthly chaos, but of celestial order, a vision of perfect mathematical harmony that perhaps offered a promise of stability and eternal beauty in a universe that had proven so violently fragile. The Black Death did not stop the building, but it forever changed the builders, the budgets, and the very symbols they carved into the stone, forcing a rebirth of style from the ashes of a devastated world. The shadow of death gave rise to an even older fear, the fear of a power that came not from God, but from his adversary. When a community watched a cathedral rise, stone by impossible stone, into the sky, they were witnessing something that bordered on magic. How could mere men achieve such a thing? One answer, whispered in taverns and passed down in fireside tales, was that they did not work alone. The architect, in the popular imagination, sometimes became a figure of dark folklore, a man who had traded his soul for the secrets of the stone. Consider the legend of the master builder of Cologne Cathedral. The story goes that the architect, desperate to finish his monumental design, found himself trapped. He could not solve the final, crucial puzzle of the vaulting. In his despair, he turned to the ultimate consultant, the devil himself. Satan offered a bargain. He would provide the missing plans, but in return, he demanded the soul of the first living being to enter the completed cathedral. The architect, cunning and confident, agreed. The devil delivered the brilliant designs, and the great church was finished. On the day of consecration, a huge crowd gathered at the doors. The architect, however, had a trick. Before throwing the doors open to the faithful, he sent a rooster, a hen, and a dog running into the empty nave. The devil, bound by the letter of their contract, had to accept the souls of the animals and stormed away in a rage, leaving a permanent crack in the cathedral's great door as a mark of his fury. This story, in countless local variations, was told across Europe. It speaks to a profound awe. The mathematics, the physics, the sheer scale of these buildings felt beyond human capability. If the work was too perfect, too daring, then perhaps its origin was not entirely divine. The myth allowed ordinary people to explain the unexplainable, to place a human, if damned, face on a superhuman achievement. Even darker is the chilling, persistent legend of the immurement sacrifice. This is the tale that a castle, a bridge, or a church would only stand if a living person was sealed within its foundation. Often, the story specifies it was the master mason's own wife, or his young daughter, who was tricked or sacrificed. The narrative served a brutal, symbolic logic. The structure demanded a life to give it life, a soul to act as a guardian spirit. Historians find no evidence that this was ever a real practice in medieval Europe, but the fact that the story emerged independently in folklore from Scotland to the Balkans is telling. It was not a record of events, but an expression of deep-seated anxiety. Building was a dangerous, precarious endeavor. Walls collapsed, scaffolds failed, towers leaned. The sacrifice myth gave people a sense of control, a ritual that could ensure stability in a terrifyingly unstable process. If you could guarantee a building's permanence by one horrific act, then a terrifying randomness of structural failure had a cause, and more importantly, a prevention. These architect demons and foundation sacrifices are not historical facts, but they are historical truths. They reveal how medieval society processed the terrifying genius of its builders. The master mason wielded knowledge that seemed arcane, almost priestly. He commanded forces of gravity and mass that could create wonder or cause catastrophe. In the public mind, this placed him in a dangerous, ambiguous space, somewhere between a holy man and a sorcerer. The folklore did not diminish his skill, it magnified it to supernatural proportions. It was the ultimate backhanded compliment, transforming the architect from a craftsman into a mythic protagonist in a cosmic drama, a man who danced so close to the divine edge of creation that people wondered who, exactly, was his dance partner. The legends of demonic pacts reveal a world struggling to comprehend the builder's power, but that power was already shifting into a new, self-conscious light. Our journey through these 30 masters ends at a threshold, where the medieval world of the Lodge gives way to the bright, inquiring dawn of the Renaissance. The figure who stands as the perfect symbol of this transformation is Filippo Brunelleschi. In the early 1400s, this Florentine goldsmith and sculptor did something none of our previous masters had done. He won a public competition to design the dome of Florence Cathedral not with a model, but with a brilliant theoretical demonstration. He challenged the builders to make an egg stand on its end, and when they failed, he simply tapped its base on the marble table, showing that the solution lay in a novel application of force. This was the new architect in action, a man who solved problems not just with his hands, but with his mind through experiment and abstract principle. Brunelleschi's dome itself is the ultimate bridge. Its double shell structure and herringbone brick pattern are feats of practical engineering that any medieval master mason would admire, born from a deep understanding of materials and thrust. Yet, its inspiration was explicitly classical, studied from the ruins of the Roman Pantheon. Brunelleschi didn't just build, he revived. This marks the fundamental shift. The medieval architect was first and foremost a master craftsman, a practicus. His authority grew from the Lodge, from his proven ability to manage men and material, and from his guarded knowledge of sacred geometry passed down through tradition. He built upon the shoulders of the immediate past, refining an existing language of pointed arches and ribbed vaults. His genius was in perfecting a system. The Renaissance architect, however, became a theoreticus, a designer and intellectual. He studied the writings of Vitruvius and measured the ruins of antiquity to derive universal rules of proportion and beauty. His authority came from his individual genius, his learning, and his connection to the humanist ideals of the classical world. He saw himself not as a link in a chain, but as a singular artist, reviving a lost golden age. The tools of the trade changed accordingly, where the medieval mason used the tracing floor and the compass for geometric layout. The Renaissance architect employed the drawing board and perspective, creating detailed plans and elevations that allowed a patron to visualize a building before a single stone was laid. The architect was no longer just the head of works on site. He was the author of a concept, often supervising from a distance while others executed his drawings. This is why we know the names of Renaissance architects so well. They worked hard to ensure we would. They wrote treatises, painted self-portraits, and designed buildings that were manifestos of their personal style. So, what does this profound transition mean for our 30 figures? They represent the magnificent culmination of a 1,000-year tradition. William of Sens, Henry Yeville, Peter Parler, and all the others stood at the very peak of a world where architecture was a collective spiritual craft, rooted in the immediate problems of gravity, light, and devotion. Their legacy is the stone symphony itself, the last and most daring expressions of a language that spoke of heaven through geometry, not through the columns of the Caesars. When Brunelleschi looked back, he saw them as masters of a venerable craft. When he looked forward, he saw himself as something new, an artist. Our 30 architects, therefore, occupy a unique and poignant moment. They were the final masters of a dying paradigm, the last great builders before the architect became a celebrity. In their cathedrals and castles, we witness the medieval imagination achieving its most sublime and confident form, pushing stone to its absolute limit just before the rules of the game change forever. Their stories are not a prelude to the Renaissance, but a glorious, complete chapter in their own right, a testament to what human hands and faith could achieve when heaven was the only blueprint they would ever need. From the soaring vaults of Canterbury to the impregnable walls of Harlech, we have journeyed through centuries of stone and genius. These 30 renowned medieval architects were far more than builders. They were visionaries who saw cathedrals of light in blocks of rough rock. They were engineers who defied gravity with a compass and a chisel. They were artists who encoded their world's deepest faith, rawest power, and most haunting fears into monuments meant to last 1,000 years. Each story, from William of Sens's tragic fall to James of St. George's geometric fortresses, is a window into a mind that could shape an era's skyline. We met the executives like Henry Yevel, the mysterious sketchers like Villard de Honnecourt, and the dynasty builders like Peter Parler. We saw how a single notebook could capture a curious mind and how a wooden octagon could answer a catastrophe of stone. Their legacies are not just in the buildings you can visit, but in the very idea of what architecture could be, a dialogue between earth and heaven fought with intellect and will. Yet for every name we recovered, thanks to scholars like John Harvey, countless others remain in the quiet. The anonymous carvers who left only a mason's mark, the women whose influence flowed through patronage and management, the entire lodges of talent that raised a vault like the one at York. These voices are the silent chorus to our soloist. This is the final, humbling lesson. History is ultimately built by individuals, by human hands and stubborn dreams, even when their names are scrubbed away by time. The next time you stand before an old stone wall, a towering spire, or even the remnant of a local abbey, look closer. That stone was chosen by someone. That curve was calculated by someone. That space was imagined by someone long before you entered it. Which of these architects' stories resonated most deeply with you? Perhaps the tragic brilliance of William of Sens, or the administrative mastery of Henry Yevel. Do you know of any local medieval builders from your own region? Figures shrouded in legend or mystery? The search for these hidden authors is a story that never truly ends. Share your thoughts and discoveries in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the minds behind the monuments, subscribe for more journeys into history's greatest